Hi, everyone. My name is Chisom. I'm the founder of Diversify. I am an economist and a diversity and inclusion practitioner, a data enthusiast, and super happy to be here again. I will now describe myself. I am a Black woman with brown skin. I am wearing my hair in long twists, currently pulled to the back. I'm wearing a maroonish turtleneck dress, but you can probably only see the top. And my environment, I'm currently sitting in our offices, and behind me is a mustardy wall, so yellowish wall, and there is, you can see two white boards. One of them is partly, you only see part of it, and then a colorful painting splash of color behind me as well. Yeah, happy to be here. I'm gonna now pass it on to Andreas.
Thank you so much, Chisom. My name is Andreas Bremnes. My pronouns are he, him. I am a white male, 38, wearing a white shirt, brown jacket, so suit jacket, black hair with glasses. And my background is currently blurred because I'm borrowing in an office space. So in case there's somebody else's work hanging behind, I wanted to be sure that it was blurred just in case there was something that wasn't supposed to be shown. But I am sitting in a high chair, pretty comfortable at the moment.
Thanks, Andreas. Sally?
Hi, my name is Sally Kamara. I'm a dark-skinned woman with short hair. You can't really see what I'm wearing right now, but I am wearing a white sweater with a white vest over it with some flowers on. I'm sitting in my living room in front of a white wall with some beautiful paintings of two women right behind me.
Thanks, Sally. Eddie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Edson Lopes. I am a Brazilian guy, so white Brazilian with short hair, dark black grayish, going to that age. I will be 40 in 15 days. So going there. And then I'm wearing a light blue t-shirt. And on my background, you are going to see there is one lamp. It's my living hall on the back. So you're going to see one lamp. There is a mirror. And on top of the mirror, you see a few board games, which is kind of my personality, is it? You see, I'm kind of a geek guy that love board games, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks, Edson. Okay, so today promises to be a really insightful perspective on disability inclusion. We cannot talk enough about disability inclusion. There are always perspectives that we can learn from. That also allows us to reflect on how inclusive we are really in the workplace, and also to explore how disability also intersects with a lot of different identities that also need to be centered. So I'm going to jump right in and come to Edson. When we talk about creating inclusive workplaces, it's really important to think about recruitment, right? It's like you need people, and to have people, you need to recruit them. And in this regard, I'm thinking about people with disability, because we see that there is quite a significant lack of representation in the workplace and leadership positions across value chain. So maybe there are opportunities to explore the language in which we use for, say, job postings, so it can be more attractive to people with disabilities, or there are other ways organizations can work, to amplify inclusion. So my question for you is, what specific actions can companies or employers take to enhance practices for recruitment that are inclusive?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chisom. I think there's a lot of opportunities in there. The first one is understand where you are with inclusion. So how do you assess your talent acquisition process, your recruitment process? What are the bias that you have in there? So you can maybe change in what the test that you're using or personality tests. And that is even before the job posting. And then assessing how that is, are you collaborating with institutions that really work with persons with disability? Are you making that connection? Are you learning from the ones who really has the needs and the experience and that can teach you what needs to be done? And I once have a project that I did build that before starting posting or going outwards very openly, and that my experience in Brazil, in there we are going to talk after, but there is a huge and strong law about inclusion of person with disability in the workplace in there. We build a relationship with, in this project, I build relationship with different institutions that has different kind of persons with disability, because we want to have the lens of all the spectrums of persons with disability, just not one. And I think it's very impossible to have just one lens, one type of person in there. So what are the needs, how we can approach, what you would like to see, to listen, to understand. And then we go to the job posting. And of course, you kept some opportunities. And then nowadays you have softwares, AIs that can help you with that to use more inclusive language. For example, some companies use, we want talented persons and etc. But talent, it may be for some underrepresented group, it's a word that they don't see themselves as talent because they have been told they are not talent, they need to perform more and more and more and more. Maybe if you change the word, if you replace, and then you are going to be inclusive. And of course, post where those persons are in the institutions. LinkedIn is not the only resources that we have to find people. And I assume that LinkedIn is one resource, it's good, but we can expand. Where are those persons? Where we can partner up with them, yeah? So inclusive language is important, high inclusive policies. How do you position yourself on your company's commitment to diversity and inclusion, and what the policies and practices that support employees with disabilities that you have? Because if you do not communicate, they may not perceive you as an employer choice for them for their career. And of course, communicate what you really do into that. And doing that, having the accessible job descriptions, specify what's the accessibility accommodations that you may need to the candidate in the process, what they will need to be there. I once have an experience, and that was my bias as a recruiter in there. I was to work in a call center, and I received one candidate that had no arms by that time. And you know, call center, you talk with the customers, and then you type, and then you go and have procedures that you need to do. And by the time that I saw the person, it was, I think, the beginning of my career, actually. I look, okay, that person cannot work in here. But then I have someone in there that was very key to keep the process. That was the manager. The manager by that time was very champion DI and say, let's do the interview and let's question what is needed to that person to work in this job. And we did that. And I have a surprise by that. That person at that moment have kind of a metal stick in the purse, putting them out and start typing normally with everyone. So they could adapt to the job, to the activity that was done. And by that, one important thing that we need to do also to attract more people, and using my experience, is prepare the HR and leaders to the talent acquisition process. Because sometimes we go through that with our assumptions, not sometimes, every time we go with our assumptions, with our bias. And then when we see something that we don't know, we never deal before, our defense mechanism comes up, and then we tend to put that away and say, no, that's not. So how do you stop that defense mechanism and say, and make what is needed for you to perform in that position, in that job? I think summarizing a little bit, that can be things that you can do to have more attraction and a more inclusive talent acquisition process.
Right. Thanks for sharing, Edson, and very great points. And I think one of the last points you brought up also looks at unconscious biases, right? Like how we see people when, be it consciously or subconsciously, make a decision about who they are, what their abilities are, what they can achieve, and how do you unpack that process? So I think like your example of just having this perspective of this person and what they will be unable to do also mirrors how sometimes, even for those of us who work in this field, like how it has to be an ongoing process. Like it's not something you learn intentionally for a year and then you're just like, I'm good, no more biases. It's just something that has to continue unraveling. And something else you talked about that I thought was really interesting is meeting people where they are. So yes, it's great to use LinkedIn and whatever recruitment websites you have, but it's really important to tap into the specific channels and the pools where you can actually find the people who have the skills. And that means partnership with the organizations where they commune. And that also sometimes means partnership ahead of time, even before you need them, right? It's kind of like thinking about what type of students do you want to recruit, and how do you start partnering with the universities and the departments just so you have a diverse and intersectional group of people. So thanks for sharing. Great segue for my next question, which goes to Andreas. Andreas, I want to ask you about like making workplaces accessible in an inclusive way. Oftentimes, when we see interventions that seeks to improve opportunities for, say, people with disability, people of color, women, oftentimes they are done almost with sanctions based on policies, right? So how can we lay a solid foundation from the onset? Like, how can workplaces do this? How can they already create inclusive environments so by the time the policies come around, you're like, hey, we're good, we're already doing this thing, we don't have to, implement all of this? What are your thoughts?
Thank you so much for that, Chisom, and really great start off from Edson as well. So I've been thinking a lot about this, and the issue is that if we start with the adaptability and the possibilities that are in the workplace, Norway has a lot of solutions that can be offered to the workplace to make it accessible, to make it possible for everyone to work there. But it's quite the big jungle. So part of HR's work would probably be like inclusion resource knowledge base, because there is so much that is possible to do that it's hard for the individual leader to actually be able to keep count on, to know what is possible to do. So that's the first head off. And always when I'm at conversations like this, I usually meet people that are already pro making changes, pro letting everyone come with their knowledge and competencies. And there are so many people that I would like to address as well that don't have this positive attitude towards it in the beginning. The research in Norway showed that there are a lot of discrimination, and I know it does as in other countries as well. But when we have conversation with employees, especially in Norway, the issue is other than what we find in the research. So we've been having a survey to the biggest companies in Norway. And even though the research shows discrimination, the survey shows that they are unable to find the talent, they are unable to attract it, and they are missing competencies. So we have to start getting them into the workplace in the first place. And that's when usually organizations start thinking, how can we make it accessible after they kind of get hired? And that makes it so much more expensive actually doing changes to an already existing organization. But my biggest takeaway to you all is the phrase one shoe fits one. And it doesn't go for disability by itself. It also goes to every worker in the company, because we used to have silos and programs to fit everyone. When we go back in time and see how we actually ran a business, you had employees perks that was the same for everyone. You had the possibilities that was the same for everyone. And that makes the talent that does not fit that profile to be excluded from that community that is work. So it's actually a leader issue that we have to start leading people with different thought, different ideas as different individuals. And the key takeaway there is curiosity, I think, that you have to be open and to ask questions and to figure out what actually drives you in the workplace. And I do hope for most of you that does interviewing that the question about what do you need to function in this role actually goes out to everyone. For if you have small children, for instance, the way you need the work to be is different, but still very real. So you still have to adapt to people with small children. You have to adapt with people with disability. You have to adapt to all your workers. But then you have to start asking the question, what do you need to be the best version of you in our workplace?
Thanks to Andreas. I'm thinking and hearing when you talk about curiosity, and because we work with companies to implement different DEI strategies, we also think that curiosity is great, action is even better, right? So it's like, be curious, find out, but it can't end at curiosity. A lot of companies where DEI initiatives don't actually succeed is they're curious and you're inspired. You're like, oh my gosh, that is so wonderful. And then nothing happens. So it's like, how do you action the things that you learn? And how do you attach actionable KPIs to the things that you want to action, and who can we hold accountable when they are not done? I think that is a proper process to go. So thanks a lot for sharing that. Sally, I want to come to you. During our conversation when we're prepping for this, you talked about something which I found quite interesting. And also it resonated with me. You talked about exclusion worsening depending on the extent of somebody's disability. It's like, how disabled are you? And then we can talk about how we can include you. Can you speak more to this?
Thank you so much for bringing that up. So I just want to take you a little back first. I worked as a news anchor at another called Supernet. So I was dealing with kids and I was making news for kids. But what I really loved with that process was that my boss at that time, he was like, okay, we're looking for a news anchor. We really want the person to have a disability. What can we do? How can we get them in? So what he did, he called Norges Handikappforbund, which is like one of the big organizations that work for and with disabled people. And he was like, hi, this is our plan. We want someone new. Who can you guys recommend? And they said, we have Sally. We can recommend her. Here is her number. Contact her. So he called me and he was like, hi, I've done my research on you. We really want a new news anchor. We don't have a job for you yet, but if you would just come in and have a conversation with us, we can figure out what we can do. And I was like, okay, you know what, let me come. And I got the job at the spot. But what I really loved was that he did not only want a disabled news anchor, but he wanted a disabled employee that really was able to do the stuff that I was supposed to do. So when I came in, he was like, okay, this is not accessible. What can we do to make sure that you're able to do the job that you're supposed to do without, becoming too tired? Because that's often what happens, when you are disabled and you come into a new workplace that's not accessible. You also need to do the work that you're supposed to do, but you also need to do extra work to get to the toilet, to get to the canteen, to kind of like maneuver around the workplace. So when I came in, he was like, okay, what do we need to change? So he changed a lot of things. And that just made me think, like, how disabled can you really be for you to actually be able to work to have a job here? Because are people actually willing to do the adjustments that you have to do? Because the least problem that I have, at least, is my disability. That's like the least of my problems in life. The problem a lot of us have might be the disabled body that we have, because that comes with a lot of more things. You know, sitting in a wheelchair, that's the most easiest thing. But living in a disabled body means that I might always not show up physically at work, because sometimes when I wake up, and I also say that to people when they want to talk to me early, when they're like, okay, Sally, can we book a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning? I'm like, I don't know if I would be able to physically be at the office at that time, because my back gets really stiff. So sometimes I need to, you know, just lay in bed for one more extra hour before I can physically get up. Is that okay? Is that tolerable? Or do I need to be at the office at 9? Is it okay? And I also have spasms a lot. That means that my body becomes tired a lot. Is it okay for me to take, you know, 10 breaks per hour? Like, is that allowed? I also have physiotherapy once a week. So that means that I won't be physically at the office for that whole day. Because yes, even though that I have my physiotherapy, that does not mean that when I'm done, I'll be able to come back, because I've been doing so much that I'm so tired. So I need to go home. So it's those things like, how disabled can I actually be for you now as a boss to say, you know what? I want you. I want to hire you. So I think, like for me, when people see me, I might be like, I might be more privileged than other disabled people, probably because there might not be as much of, you won't really need. I don't really need a lot of changes to be done. But the truth is that my disability is so rare. Like when you look at the world, the scale of people who have deeper disabilities are higher than you know, a person like me probably, or to Andreas. So getting Sally in is amazing, but Sally is not the blueprint. And I also asked the question because here in Norway, in 2020, we had like 150 people with a disability standing outside of work. So that's why I'm like, but what's the issue? Is it that people are too disabled to be hired, and that people are afraid to kind of like touch on how they can adapt, and how they can kind of like make sure that the disabled person that's in the business can actually thrive and not become so tired? So
Sally,
how
did you say 150,000 people?
Yeah, in 2020 though, it's probably changed now, but in 2020 it was 150 people with a disability that wasn't working, and they really wanted to work as well. So it's not that they were just sitting and enjoying life, that they really wanted to work, but people didn't hire them. So that's why I'm always asking, why? Is it the level of disability? And we also have something called julebord in Norway. And we have Christmas parties and things like that. And so I really like the question that you asked, that inclusion worsens depending on the extent of one's disability. Because a lot of people, when they, for example, arrange julebord. I've been to so many that I can't even go to the toilet. I can't even get into the venue. Some people have it on a boat, you know, and it's kind of like, but why? When you know that you have employees that aren't physically able to access it, why then do you choose to have it at a place that you've always had it just because it's worked? No, it's your responsibility to make everyone feel like they are a part of the team. And unfortunately, that happens at the parties.
Right. Thanks a lot for sharing, Sally. I'm reminded of one of our taglines at Diversify is "Come as you are," and I see that it's also what a lot of companies talk about. But it's like, it's one thing to say it and it feels good. It's another thing to action, you know, that thing. Like, come as you are, what does that actually mean? It means, you know, I often talk about this when I think about the sense of psychological safety. Like a lot of companies talk about it. It's really great. Let's stamp it all in every second sentence we say, and automatically people are going to feel psychologically safe. And it's the action for psychological safety. And sometimes why a lot of people don't feel safe is that it's people say, come as you are, but really, yeah, but don't come with that. Oh, don't come with that. Ooh, I don't like that anxiety. You're bipolar. Oh my gosh, let's not talk about it. It's like, you're this. Oh my gosh, let's, you know. So it's like, you're talking about psychological safety, but I'm actually not psychologically safe because you directly exclude me based on how you think I should present within this A4 sheet of paper that I should fit into. So quite interesting. Edson, I want to come to you because sometimes we know that any inclusion intervention requires an ability to reprimand or like hold people accountable, and sometimes policies and practices. So I want to talk about quotas. Oftentimes when we talk about quotas, people are just like, oh my gosh, you want to give a quota so like a woman has the job, even if she's not talented enough, but you're just going to put a man out. Same thing with people with disabilities. And then we know that you started your career within DEI and disability inclusion in Brazil. And we also know that, at least what I know, that the government in Brazil did impose a quota for people with disabilities within the workplace. So I want to ask you, how do you feel about quotas? One, and second, how successful was it?
No, that's a good question. And the quota system is a double-edged sword, right? Every time that the topics come out, people start the polemic and etc. My humble opinion, I think the quota system can serve as a mechanism to address the representation, the opportunities, and equity to people that would never get a chance if it wasn't for the quota system. But the effectiveness of that depends on various factors. It's not an easy thing. But on my opinion, and I'm going to share some numbers with you about what happened in Brazil, it's going to reinforce, like, if you start, you need to have something that you can measure. You need to have something that you can see the progress. You need to have something that people look into at the drivers that's going to propose that. How happened in Brazil? The law of inclusion of persons with disability started in 1991. And it says that every organization needs to have between 2% and 5% of their headcount with persons with disabilities. Can be entry level, can be leadership, but between 2 and 5%. And what is going to determine the percentage is the number of employees. Above 1,000 employees, it's 5%. Below that, there is a math system that is going to calculate how much it needs to be. If you go and say, okay, did you achieve the 5%? Brazil achieved the 5%? No, not yet. We are in 1% at this moment. I was checking the websites yesterday of the Brazilian Institution of Brazilian Geography and Statistics. We are 9%. But in 2001, 1991 was the starting of the law, and 2001 was the audit with the organizations. We came from 700 in a country as big as Brazil, 700 persons with disability in 2001 to 500,000 people with disability working today. And I can say it goes and it started with the quota. And of course, we are not there yet, but the progress has been made in the job market for this population. And when you started and the quota, maybe it's something we need to have the number to be that. And that's the danger sides of it, because we cannot go the number just by the number. We need to promote a good employee life cycle to everyone, address what's the individual needs to that person, as same as we would do to the other employees, but understand the individual needs. However, the quota system, it is addressing underrepresentations. What you are seeing now, you have persons with disability in leadership positions, middle managers, senior leadership position, some of it, but it's still not a lot more. And then we have some programs that the organization is starting doing, creating opportunities like trainee program, graduate program, but specific for persons with disability, which normally they would not have that opportunity if they would be competing with everyone else. And now what the movement that is starting the Brazilian companies that I'm talking with my colleagues in there, they are in the moment, they are job posting the positions and they are saying, any position is for persons with disability. It's not just now target for persons with disability. So they have to go through the process so the business could see the benefits, and the benefits in employee engagement, in work environment, in profits. I have one very short case. I once used to work in a car insurance company in Brazil, and we have the quota system, we had the program, etc. Two things that happened in there. Part of the program was to hire persons with disability to work home office, and it was before pandemic. It was a long time ago, right? And you know, I'm from São Paulo, so the office was in São Paulo. And in São Paulo, it's in the news every February or March, they float what happens with the river because of the rain, etc. An insurance company, they work a lot with call center. There was 2 days in a row that the rain was so strong in São Paulo. And then the leader of the call center went to the call center, but it took 3 hours to get in the call center. They thought the waiting line of the customer would be very huge, like car accidents happens in that time. And it was okay. It was all done. And that's why, because the persons they have hired working in home office handle the situation in that. And going beyond that, the group that start working the project for persons with disability, we hire people that were business experts, and they develop a special insurance, car insurance for persons with disability, because what they didn't find out, the number of accidents of persons with disabilities is way less than the accidents of persons with no disabilities. Right. So they said, we can charge less. We have this public, we have this target, we have this population that want to consume from us. And guess what? That was in the year they launched, that was the most profitable car insurance they had in there. So then when the company started seeing those benefits, they say, okay, so we need to go beyond the quota, beyond the quota in there. But of course, in this process, we need to take care about tokenism. Okay, we hire the person putting the quota, and the person is there just because it's a person with disability, and that's the danger side of it. Right. Because I always say, like, when you talk to any underrepresented group, being part of it, it means that you have to live the experience, but your lived experience comes with some privilege, maybe. Right. So how do you educate yourself to speak about the community that you are part of, etc.? And sometimes you see they put some people in there because has the disability, but what's coming with it? And we need to avoid stigmatization. So all the time working with the leaders, with the employees to not stigmatize the persons with disability. They came through the quota, we identify the individual needs, promote, remove the barriers, and they perform. That's the result. Right. It was a long answer.
No, it's good. Thanks, Edson. Kind of what I collect from that as well, and also from my own work, is the and I know I've heard Andreas talk about this. I do a lot of different activists within, say, disability space. The tagline of "Nothing about us without us." And I think some of the things I collect from this is, one, if you're doing interventions to amplify disability inclusion, do not design that without people with disabilities. And at the same time, do not just tokenize or what's it called, stereotype people with disabilities only on issues concerning people with disabilities. I mean, definitely include them, but also represent them in other sectors, also represent them as leaders, represent them as, you know, doctors, represent them as athletes, represent them in different spaces because they are in different spaces. Something else that comes up for me is that quotas are in some sense a springboard, you know, to get people who are historically marginalized, underrepresented, and overlooked into positions where they absolutely deserve to be in. So quotas, I think oftentimes people automatically understand that as, oh, it means you're settling for somebody who's not as skilled. It means that you're giving somebody who's substandard a position just because you have to fill this quota. but quotas are necessary, especially because we operate in oppressive systems that have been predetermined before we came, forward. So that's one of the things I think we should think about in reframing how we think about quotas. And when those quotas have worked, like you talked about, Eddie, then we can say, all right, maybe we don't need quotas anymore because we've solved the problem and given people an equal playing field, so to say. The next thing I want to talk about is intersectionality. I am still, like all of us in this who are speaking in this panel are currently in Oslo, right? And in Norway. I am still, is the word flabbergasted? I'm just stunned by the lack of intersectional lens in any kind of intervention, be it disability, be it gender, whatever it is. There is generally a one-track frame for like, who's a person with disability? Who are women? And there is a significant lack of representation that sometimes when I talk about intersectionality, people looking at me like, why are you making a fuss? So let's make a fuss. On intersectionality, for those who don't know, intersectionality is an analytical framework that was developed by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989 that basically looks at how our experiences are shaped through layers of privilege or the lack thereof. What this means is that we are never just one thing. We have intersecting identities. And these intersecting identities mean that, we experience the world differently. Saleh and I, for example, can identify as Black women, but we have different intersecting identities that shape or predict the outcome of our lives. So question here is for both Sally and Andreas to discuss in how do you experience intersectionality in your life, and how does it compound or amplify your experience of the world? Andreas?
Yeah. Thank you for that question, because it's a little back to what we talked about regarding silos. Like we plan out things to put people in boxes, and we don't fit those boxes because we have different personality with us as well. So when you meet me on camera, like you guys are doing today, I look like a white privileged man in a suit, around the age of 40, that has all the opportunities ahead of me. And I am privileged. I have to admit that as well, because I'm in a leadership position with power as well. But when you zoom out of the camera, I'm also a person with cerebral palsy, and I'm also married to Thomas. And when it comes to that intersectionality, it's not viewed when you see me. You can't see it right away, which gives me naturally some heads up, but also is challenging because they make assumptions on me as well. So when it comes to research done by a company called Proba, they showed that when it comes to gender, for instance, it doesn't really matter if you are disabled, because you're then put at the same level. So there are bigger differences between men and women that are not disabled than it is when we are disabled, because then we are put in a group together and we're just the same. Also, when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community as well, there are some factors there putting disability lower on the list for also accessibility to the clubs, and a research shown there as well, shown that a lot of people just assumes that people with disability don't have a sexuality. So there is actually a movement going that we need to be seen as whole persons as well. And you don't really think about that when we meet us. And there are, of course, I'm not going around asking colleagues or thinking about how the colleague's sexual life is, but the admittance that I have one should also be acknowledged when we talk about our plans for the weekend, when we talk about what we're going to do in the summer vacation. There's a part of me that I have to present over and over and over again. And when it comes to me, with my background, and I'm educated in economy, I'm a problem solver. And I met my husband and he's anything but. He's a very free-minded spirit. He has a lot of feelings that he's not afraid to show, and that gave me a bunch of perspectives as well that I'm so happy that I got to experience with him. And we take and develop our perspective through our abilities, through our experiences. And as you said, Chisom, the bring your whole self is so important. And instead of me going to hide that I'm gay when I'm going into the office, or have to prefer to have web interviews because then I look normal and don't get treated in the workplace any different, then it's actually the point that I get to be my whole self with the right employer. So I don't have to use energy framing my story, framing my how I do things. I can just be who I am, and I can tell people, you know what? I actually fell pretty hard because of my handicap, so I won't be in for a couple of days, and that's fine. But it's about living the true self that is important. And I really hope that when you see this, I used to take an example in a conference I was at and said, well, if I come to your interview, one thing is my disability, but what about the causes of it? Because usually I love coffee, I drink a lot of coffee. And usually during the day, especially the long days, I will have a coffee stain on my clothes. Now, are you going to judge me for that coffee stain thinking I don't clean my clothes? Or are you actually going to accept that, I have a disability? There will be stains from time to time. So that's my experience with that.
Thanks for sharing. Sally?
Yes. So thank you so much for sharing that, to Andreas. Even though you're a man and I'm a woman, I feel like we still because of our disability, we still have a lot of the same things. And so like like I said, like I'm a Black woman who happens to have a disability. So I maneuver in this world a little differently. Like my personal experiences, what I like saying though to people, I don't know, it probably makes people very uncomfortable because just saying the word disabled, people always try to find other words to use, but I'm like, I'm hella disabled. I am so disabled, and I throw it out there. I let my legs shake when they're shaking. Like when I go to the toilet, if I meet someone on the way and I have a catheter in my hand, like I don't hide it, I'm holding it so you can see what it is, because it's just like a natural part of me, because I want people to get used to catheters, getting used to leg shaking, getting used to all of the things that comes with having and living with a disabled body. uh, but I feel like being Black and being a woman kind of goes in the back burner sometimes. Well, not sometimes, very often. And because people always see my disability first. So my challenge is to kind of like tell people that, but I am a woman first, I'm Black before anything, like don't be careful how you kind of like, just like Tudamir said, the boxes you put people in. Because when people meet me, and we have this, stigma of disabled people that we're quiet, we need a lot of help. And then you meet Sally that cusses people out, I don't have like a meek voice. I discuss, I have a big energy. I love talking to people and I love being a part of society. So that sometimes takes people back. But don't forget that I'm a human being first, And I remember when I was younger, when I, used to party, go out and have fun and all of that when I was 21. I've been in so many situations where people have come up to me, gone down and thanked me for coming outside and enjoying. And I'm like, but I'm 21. That's what I'm supposed to do. And when I was 19 and sneaking out of the house, when I was like 14, sneaking out of the house, that's what I was supposed to do. But because I had a disability, people were shocked. How could I sneak out of the house? Because my friends got me out. So I think that people need to actually remember that we have a physical age, we have a physical other things that comes with the reason to why I'm at the club, why I'm at the doctor's with my boyfriend. So yeah, like my biggest dream is to become a philanthropy. But I don't think people even think that we have the possibility of dreaming, because our biggest dream should be walking, you know. How can you think about saving the world? You should be thinking about saving yourself. And so it's for me, it hasn't been a challenge, but it's quite hard because I know that you won't see me as a woman first. You won't see me as a Black woman first. You will only see me as a disabled person until I now am able to show you that I'm not that disabled. Then we can now focus on the other groups, you know. So
thank you for sharing. What is resonating for me based on what you just said is, I think sometimes, like in my own experience, at my own intersection of like disability and neurodiversity and being Black, is I don't even think Black person comes into people's minds just like Black. And then person is just like a thing that comes way after, right? And I think that also for people with disabilities, sometimes you're seen first as, yeah, a person with disability, but I don't think the person aspect of things actually computes, that you are human, that you have similar needs, and like in terms of like ambitions, aspirations, that you want to thrive the same way every other person wants to thrive, you know. So we're labeled quite easily by the most present identities that we carry. And I think that's quite interesting. I do want to talk about neurodiversity, because oftentimes neurodiversity is either not acknowledged, or sometimes it's celebrated. Like it really depends on who is handling, you know, the perspective around neurodiversity. So my question for you, Edson, is when we talk about disability and neurodiversity, how do those relate? And also, how can workplaces create interventions that are inclusive of people who are neurodiverse?
Thanks, Chisom. Yeah, when you did that question in the previous meeting that we have, I start thinking like, who is handling the conversation? Who they consider neurodiverse? What the profile of that person? And then why this topic is coming so stronger now, and etc. And then I relate to my lived experience. I have two nephews. One is they are in the spectrum of autism, my brother or my dad. But my niece was the last one and took years to be diagnosed. And why? And then I'm very curious. You see, I said the geek one, I was trying to see the number of certs about investigation in autism is more in boys and men than in women. And because it's hard to diagnose, because some of the behaviors of women, it's more acceptable in society. So it's hard to feed, oh, that girl has autism, not because she was shy. For us, she was just a shy person, a shy girl, trying to not make too many friends, very focusing animes, mangas, those kind of things. And she liked to listen to her music. And then we, the bias that we have internally also affects that. So that it got me in that place, our conversation last time. And what organizations can do in considerations to create neurodiverse work environments in that. I have two cases that I would like to share. One is from Walgreens, and another one is from Natura. It's the company that acquires Body Shop a few years ago. And this case for me, it says it's standard what needs to be done in the organizations for persons with disability and neurodiverse. They were building new distribution centers. And to start the construction of the distribution centers, they were in the journey for inclusion of person with disabilities a long time. So they partner up with those institutions and say, what do we need to do if we had at least 50% of those distribution centers working with neurodiverse? And it was a project, the one in Natura that I worked together very closely as an educator in there. It took 5 years until they said, that's how the distribution centers will look like. And they have to look about work arrangement. They need to be more flexible in hours, remote control, the variations of workplace when they need to be some quiet areas to be focused, the sensory consideration, adjusting lighting temperature controls, and the communication styles and how we would transfer all the organization comes to the distribution center. In the training and awareness, we would consider all the kind of neurodiversity to promote a training, and how do we assess if the knowledge is being used, and how do we propose. So we have to change everything, basically, all the process and procedure to adapt the distribution center for that. And that was the beginning. Afterwards, and I can say after 1 year, we did start saying, okay, those people, they deliver, they outperform, they overperform, and they have potential to do something more. And from the distribution center, they start creating pathway to office, head office, and leadership positions in that. So those would be cases that I was trying to say, so what practicalities can we do to make that more inclusive to neurodiverse? And of course, this was one thing to include. The other thing, what about the environment, the barriers that we have around? So it was clear part of the process was involving all the colleagues and leadership to reduce the stigma, to reduce the barriers they would face if they want to thrive in the organization. And it was done very specifically with the need of those people and the need of the business in having those distribution centers and then building the pipeline to the office and etc. Those are two organizations that I see cases very strong that I would like to share.
Thanks a lot for sharing that. Yeah, I had a thought, but it has jumped out of my head because I think, when you talk about neurodiversity, what I wanted to say here was it's so important to also understand that even when people have the same diagnosis, that they can their symptoms can be different. I find it really interesting when I tell people, like I have ADHD and I have an anxiety disorder, and they have a picture of what somebody with ADHD does. They're just like, what? How? Like, you get so much done. You're not flying off the rails. Are you on medication? You're not on medication. How do you manage? And sometimes, sometimes I talk about the fact that I have an anxiety disorder, and they're like, but you always have it together. Like you look like you have everything on track. And I think there is not one way to be. And usually when we talk about ADHD, or when we talk about anxiety, or when we talk about depression, there is an idea of what it is to be those things. And that is what we need to also unlearn. That the same symptoms manifest differently in different people.
Definitely. Can I add something? Sorry, Chisom.
Of course.
100% agree with you. When we spoke about that, like I think sometimes people play that as a star zodiac sign, right? So if you are this, then you are that. If you are this, then and that's not. And mostly with neurodiverse, and something that I'm trying to break the barrier, the stigma is also they are good in codification, they are good in memorization, they are good in this. So let's hire 100% of our programmers, persons with autism, Asperger. And I have some nephews, I can tell one of them will not be able to do that. It's like, what do you need? So start from what do you need, what the criteria that you have, and then look for the people. Do not look for the disability, look for the capability in that. It's a good point. I 100% agree with you.
Absolutely. Sally, I want to talk quickly about tech. Basically, how can we use technology to amplify workplace accommodations in a way that I don't want to say prosper, but allows people with disability actually thrive in the workplace.
Could you break it down a little bit more?
So what I'm asking here is that oftentimes when we talk about workplace inclusion, you know, organizations have to navigate the legal aspect of ensuring that they are inclusive workplace, along with the possibility to support career progression. What we find sometimes in workplaces is that for people with disabilities, they are at the entry level or beginning or like admin or help position. They never really sometimes have the same career projection as others, where you can see, for example, somebody who started and you can see all the way they climbed to become CEO. Sometimes that path doesn't seem feasible or even clear for people with disability. So I guess my question is there a way to leverage technology or even just like policies in the workplace to ensure that even people with disabilities and every single other person have the same opportunity to actually ascend within the workplace?
I feel like it's a really huge question because like it didn't start today, kind of, you know, like the problem didn't start today, especially when it comes to disabled people. It starts when we are born, literally. I live in Oslo, and 80% of the schools in Norway are not accessible. So that means that it even starts in kindergarten, you know, because it's not like we just come of the womb and we are grown people and now it's time to kind of like, you know, find a job. We have a process to it. And when you don't see us in the process of your childhood, you won't be able to see us at the workplace. So for me, I'm kind of like, I really want to come with the, oh, this is the solution and this is how we can leverage. But I'm sorry, when you don't even see us in the same classrooms as other students, when you don't even see us at the same restaurants as other people, when the like it's so many things that kind of like keeps us just moving backwards. I remember that when I started studying at the university, I was going to be a social worker. I studied for a year, and then the teachers took me into an office and they were like, "Oh, girl, your energy is so amazing. You're a good student. Like you bring so much energy to the class, but unfortunately, I don't think you'll be able to finish this your bachelor because obviously I couldn't walk, and we were gonna have like we're gonna have something for 6 months where we should be able to at least have some strength in our legs. So you get told that this is not for you. You get told to drop out of school. You get told to kind of like don't even get a job because we have NOV, so they will help you out. So we don't have a lot of help me out to Andreas. Expectations, yeah, expectations. Sorry, we don't have a lot of expectations shown towards us. So I feel like it's not even a workplace problem. It's the fact that we don't get the educations. We're far behind when we get the educations. Some of us actually need to also use more time with the education because we go to the hospital and we have other things happening in our life that, you know, become bigger than the education. So like this is not a problem of today. This is a thing of we need to actually like make a whole new society where everyone has the same expectations from birth. Because that's also easy to kind of know that, okay, you're here because of you got here. So, but I feel like we need to start hiring people. We need to start hiring people, and also like don't make it a campaign because that's so hard to do when it comes to disabled people. It's like a campaign. Okay, now we're hiring Sally as the news anchor, but only for 2 years, and then she needs to go. And then it's like, but why? And that's what happens a lot with disabled people. You come into the workplace and they're not even honest with you. You think that you're here to, you know, get your full-time job and do all of those things. And then you find out that, nah, it's just a campaign, you know,
Right.
It's just to get the thing going.
Right.
And then you stick to the curve after you've done what you're supposed to do. So actually see the value in hiring someone with a disability, like Edson said, that you need to see the value in hiring them first of all. But this is not even now. This is a society problem. It starts It starts from level 0 for us to even be able to talk about how technology can help us, because I don't even know a lot of people in tech. We don't see disabled people in tech. Like, people don't even hire us. So we don't even know the problems that are in different eras, you know, because we don't have anyone there to kind of speak about the problems. So the problems that are spoken about is from a person that's not disabled or doesn't wear those glasses.
Right. Thanks, Ola, for sharing that. And it's actually a fantastic point about when we're talking about the workplace, it's already too late. Like, how are we talking about this from the onset, you know? And I think one of the things that come up for me is like, how do we also have an intersectional lens to, you know, inclusion is recognizing, for me, I always say to our clients, like, the first thing is you are not the norm. Like, whatever way you think the world works, what you think is how a person should present, it's valid, but you are not the norm. You know, somebody else's way is also equally valid. And I'm reflecting on representation. That's so important. You know, I can think that for me, you know, just like being intentional about even the books, like I'm like my children read, you know, so for me, it's not just that they should have people of color. I want to see ballerinas in wheelchairs, you know, I want to see all these different bits that you don't easily see. And I can tell you the work it takes for me to hunt. So there's also an intention, because these books are not readily available. It's like, I am so intentional in hunting for the books. And a lot of my friends, they know I care about this. So sometimes they find books, they gift it to, you know, my kids. And I'm so grateful for that. I want to say something about privilege as well. And I tell this story because I think it's so important. Like, in my work, I'm passionate about a lot of things, you know, like I feel like I can't only show up for Black people or women. I need to show up with that same energy for every other, you know, like identities. And also for me having, you know, this disability / neurodiversity, I often think about it, but I reflect on the privilege that I have. So this story is about the fact that I have 2 kids now. My first is 4, my second, who's sick and on me currently, is 7 months old. When I had my first child, you know, I'm in Norway. Like, I assumed that everything was accessible. And I came to find that it is not accessible to go around Oslo with a pram, like with a stroller. And it was infuriating to me that I cannot get on the trams. You know, there are places if I need to go through the station, I need to go through some random route that takes significantly longer to just get where I need to get. And I remember just being so upset, and I complained to every single person who would listen. And then my child became about 1.5 years, 2 years old, and she wanted to walk. She didn't want to like sit on the pram. So I stopped having to drive her around with the pram. And then I just forgot how annoying it was until I had my youngest now, who I definitely have to take everywhere with a pram. And again, I'm reminded at how pissed off I was. I'm also reminded at how inaccessible it is. And then I reflect on the fact that for me, I get this period of break where I'm just like, oh, you know, it's annoying right now, but I don't have to deal with this. It's annoying, but I can still lift up my pram and go up the stairs with my kids, you know. And I'm reflecting on the privilege of being able to forget, because for some people, it's their every single day. They don't get to forget. They don't get to like take a break. It's every single day of their lives. So I also reflect on that privilege, and I think most of us should do as well, because you have to know how it hurts, not just temporarily, but also sometimes all the time. So thanks for sharing. I have a last question before I have a couple of questions, but last question to Andreas. When we're talking in the pre-panel discussion, you talked about ableism around how CEOs are always the people who are cycling 6 o'clock in the morning, or running intense marathons, or like climbing mountains and skiing. And that is so inherently ableist around like what leaders are, what leaders should do. It's those people who like they drink juice, you know, the entire life. Like I'm blowing that out of proportion, but you catch my drift. So my question is, how can organizations actually challenge and define ableist norms and basically rid themselves of predefined expectations of who a leader is and what is successful.
Thank you so much. It's quite a big question as well. But what I have seen is that we had a lot of research going into physical health and fitness, and there was a wave in the northern countries, especially going through. If you're unhealthy, you're more sick, so everybody has to start exercising. And one of the examples of the research that came after we done this showed that, if you gave an opportunity to exercise, it's the people that already exercise that take advantage of the exercise possibilities. So you're not really making any changes. But when I'm at work, I work a lot and I love my work and everything I do. And I'm not disabled per se as I do my work because everything functions. I found my solutions, I found my way of doing things. But the second my previous country leader started this exercise routine, and we were all going to go out for a walk when the pandemic started, and I considered joining. For those of you that don't know me, I'm not in a wheelchair. I'm able to walk, but short distances. But when I saw that these tour groups punched about 2-3 kilometers every time they went out the door, I signed out because I don't have the energy or capabilities to do so. That does not mean I don't want to participate. I do still want to be a part of that network. And I was taking that away from me. Now, I'm not saying you're not supposed to be active. I'm not saying you're not supposed to do hikes or do those things as well, but it's showing the variety of possibilities. So if you, for example, think about how does this include everyone? And I might be disabled, but also the people that had a hip problem or had lower metabolism had troubles as well. So what we did, we, for instance, met on a coffee and had a chat with the required distance, of course. But the point is to see everyone and have communication about it. And what fascinates me about this is especially one thing, because I've been asked a lot, well, how do I address this? How do I ask for this? And my experience is that a lot of leaders and people that want to do good, and I have to emphasize that, a lot of people want just to do what's right. And we need to acknowledge that as well. They don't wake up to be discriminatory. They wake up trying to do their best. So I have to acknowledge that. But when they come to me and ask, well, you can't walk, so what can we do instead? That sets the premise that my suggestion cannot be activity, because that sets the other way internally as well, because I would love to go out for a quick walk around the neighborhood just airing my head, but that is then suddenly off the limit. So instead of coming to me with curiosity and say, okay, you're a part of this team, how do you suggest that we can build team spirit even though pandemic sets certain boundaries? Then I can share openly about what I see fitting and what is still available for me, instead of just assuming that there are things I cannot do or assuming that I am not going to participate in things. And that is a little troublesome for me. And the main takeaway I have always is to identify what is actually competence. We talked earlier about getting them into leadership, and I fully support Sally with the whole system issue with education and home and everything that needs to be done. But the people that come into the workplace as well, let's say you have an assistant and you had that for 10 years, you're actually a leader for them. So you have leader capabilities, you have leader competencies, but that is not an acknowledged competency because it's something you do on your spare time. because you're not paid to do so. But we need to acknowledge that competency and that what we actually know and learn, so we can advance the people with different competencies outside of formal education and work experience as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Something came up for me when you talked about no one wakes up with a bad intention to harm other people. I can agree with that. But I do think it's also important to shift power here. Because oftentimes people say, I had the best intention, but I had the best intention. Your best intention does not mean anything to me if that impact continues to harm me, right? So it's not enough to have the best intention. What's that thing Madonna said? The way to hell is filled with good intentions. We don't want your good intentions. Do better. Just having good intentions, right? Because the impact absolutely matters, and one of the things we need to remember here is impact always trumps intent. Because oftentimes it's the people who are harmed who are supposed to be understanding of the people with the good intentions, right? So if we shift and reframe the way we think about this, where it is my responsibility to ensure that I don't harm you. I don't know everything, so I may mess up. It is my responsibility to take responsibility for harming you and not emphasizing the good intention that I had. So I think it's important to also look at it from that perspective, that intention is great, impact is more important. And then I want to move to a super controversial question here. What we see, we're talking about disability inclusion, and we've talked about the intersections of how that intersects with race, with gender, with sexual orientation, and other identifiers. But one of the things we can see as well is that there are some topics and some identities in DEI that are more palatable to talk about. So let's talk about gender. Let's talk about neurodiversity, but no, God forbid, let's not talk about race. Let's not talk about this. Let's not talk about that, right? And neurodiversity has gained significant following. It's like, oh my gosh, let's talk about neurodiversity, but let's not talk about disability, right? Let's not touch that because it's too tricky. And I am of the opinion that, of course, we're talking about neurodiversity because of the target groups that are often quite affected by neurodiversity. So I want us to discuss that openly. It seems to me that there is also a power balance or imbalance on the type of conversations that are amplified. So, for example, white folks are also neurodiverse. So let's really talk about that, because then we don't have to have difficult conversation around race, or we don't have to talk about difficult conversations necessarily about trans inclusion, but really let's focus on neurodiversity. What are your thoughts? Who wants to go first?
Well, I can start, Chisom. Again, the question that comes in my mind is, who is the neurodiverse group serving? What the interest that we have behind? Is the neurodiverse collective for everyone, regardless the gender, race, and sexual orientation or the identity? Or are we still talking about a specific group of neurodiverse people? I think that's the questions that we have. Or we are talking about neurodiverse, but just the one who has kind of the genius mindset that we say, and why they became genius and etc. And then if we go in history, in society and etc., why we talk about Einstein and not another scientist? Why he will speak about one to be the genius? Because he represents something. He represents the interest of someone that holds power and something that's my humble opinion. I always go to history and say, okay, but what the interest that we have behind it? It's good that we can starting in and then amplify to other groups and etc. But what I see sometimes, let's talk about this, but let's not amplify here. It's too, we are going to touch other people's feeling.
Absolutely. You have to be the right kind of disabled. You have to be the right kind of neurodiverse. The same way you have to be this right kind of woman, the right kind of man, the right kind of trans person. It's interesting. And that we need to challenge because it continues to happen. Sally, please jump in.
Yes, and I think it's like taking it back to how disabled can you actually be? Like what is acceptable? Like Edson said, who do we actually champion? Because we have in Norway we have Fernanda Nissen, and she's like a big spokesperson for women in Norway, and she's done amazing things. But I don't know if people also know that she had a disability, but we don't talk about that. That she, I don't know if she had cerebral palsy. I'm so sorry for saying you wrong, or if it was polio, but she had something that made her body different, you know. But we don't mention that. So is like Edson said, who with the neurodivergent fits kind of, is it Einstein? Or because me too, like I have ADHD, but do I put that in after you've seen that I have a disability, you know, knowing that you now need to do all of the physical adjustments, but now you also need to kind of like put in place that I don't get too tired at work, or that I don't get all of the information at once. So, but personally, my opinion, if you're white and you have, you know, if you're white and it fits for you, that's usually the way we go. And if you're not, then you're kind of X'd out. So it's like a privilege thing. Yeah, definitely.
Right. I think about depression because it's a disability, right? And I think on psychological safety and come as you are, oftentimes we want the people who have healed after a depressive episode to come talk about, you know, the depression and how they survived it. But we don't actually want the people who are currently depressed, you know, the people who need the support, the people who are not always going to be upbeat. You know, we don't want to address that. We want to kind of like pretend like it doesn't exist. And one of the things I often hear, and sometimes I find it quite heartbreaking for people at workplaces who are struggling, is, oh, but keep it positive. Like keep it high energy, you know, like we want to inspire. Let's not make it kind of like a, you know, like we don't want people feeling sad. We want people to feel good. Keep it good. I'm just like, what is your idea about what it takes to actually create interventions that last? People don't always show up like, hey, yo, jolly, jolly, jolly. No, like sometimes you're having hard days. Like, Sally.
I talk about this often, and unfortunately, I don't have like a workplace to go to now. I work for myself. But one thing that I've always been so hard on is that we're humans first, all of us. We're not robots. And life always happens, even when you're at work. And sometimes the things that are happening in life while you are at work might actually be so profound that if you don't tend to it now, it might actually disrupt your whole life when you get back home. So it's so important to know that life always happens throughout the day. It doesn't shut off just because you go to work at night and then you come back home and then you can kind of like, okay, let me figure things out. And I think because people don't feel safe at work, you have colleagues, you know, you can talk to someone, just give them a compliment, or you discuss with someone and suddenly now your name is at HR, or suddenly now your boss wants to talk to you. So it's also like, how do we meet people at work? This is a human being that you're meeting. Like, this is not a robot that you're meeting, to kind of look at each other as humans and know that we go through this human experience throughout the day, and that this fake positivity that we're going and promoting is actually just making people sicker, because people are not able to ask for a break, you know. People are not able to say that but I am angry right now. And one thing that I pride myself in wherever I work is that I'm very raw. If I'm happy, you know, if I'm stressed out, you know. And it's also easier for people to know how to kind of handle you throughout that day, you know. They know that, okay, because I've come in, you see my face is a little frowny, and I tell people like, today I am pissed off. Don't talk to me. Don't talk too much to me. And it's easier. It makes people know that, okay, today, Saleh, not too many jokes, maybe tomorrow.
Right.
But to not tiptoe around things, but we don't tiptoe when we're home, you know. So I think it's so important to make like a safe net for people to actually be humans and know that feelings come along throughout the day, and to actually, yeah, and to make a safe space is so important, because if you don't, the other things that might come up are worse. Then you hear about you hear
Right.
people not showing up.
Right. To Andreas.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that because I think that's a discourse to the conversation about a work-life balance, because it's suddenly going to be two individual things, and we all know that it isn't, because the life affect the work and the work affect the lives. If you have a shitty boss, it will affect your home life. If you have a shitty home life, it's going to affect your work life. So even though we're gonna, the point of the work-life balance in the beginning was to make sure that you didn't work endlessly throughout the day, and I of course support that. But we're now saying that they're two different individuals, and I have an issue with that as well. And when it comes to the things that you bring up, Sally, one of the things I ask my candidate is, how can I know that you have a good day? And how can I know that you have a bad day? Because some of the ones I worked with prior, the happiest people are maybe covering something that they are not able to speak about and not have the room to do so. And then you just assume that, well, she's so happy or he's so happy. Of course, he's having a great time. And I actually heard a TED talk about that from Sam something. And he said that he had two people that quit his job. And he was like, well, why are you quitting? I know how much you do. So you're not overworked. What is actually happening? But what he discovered when he went into this was that those two people were the load off of the entire company. Everybody came to them because they were acceptable to taking in all the frustration, all the hurt, all the. So they were exhausted for being kind of the office dumpster. And we have to acknowledge that work-life balance affects both sides.
Absolutely. Edson, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was thinking like very easy, but like, why do I remember all the bad things that my dad did to me and not the good things that my mom did to me? And then I say, it's human nature. That sometimes the best thing that you are going to do in the day is just wake up. And that's a lot. It can be a lot depending on the moment that you have in your life, and maybe you have a problem with partners or whatever what you struggle with. And we need to understand that we especially us that we work in global organizations, what happens in one country in the other side of the world may affect you in there as well, because we are all connected. You have a friend, a colleague, or something like this. I think we need some time to embrace that it's okay not to be okay, and say, and in the culture, how do we prepare people to say I'm not okay, and how do we support those people to say that, and we need to lift that conversation. We need to have the safe environment to do so and prepare the leaders to receive, and also how do we equip the leaders how to deal with that. Because like, I think I've been working with HR for the last 20 years, and the things that people do not quit organization, they quit leaders. And then there is the last I think the last research from Gallup saying having a best friend or having a friend at work is one of the most engagement thing that you can do for now nowadays. So it's basically we are talking about being human again. And this thing of remember the bad things and not the good things. I love neurolinguistics. So it says like when something bad happens to you, it sticks more because the kind of hormone stays in your body for longer. And when you have some good experience, your brain liberates oxytocin that it's going in a few hours. in that. So we need to promote more good things, but real, and it's okay not to be okay. That's the thing that I would like we need to be back to be humans.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. One of the things that resonates for me when Sally was talking was about you don't get to park who you are outside the front door before you enter the office. Like whatever experience you had does not stop. You don't get to, okay, we're just going to compartmentalize that and park it. And I'm going to go in here and be this jolly person. And then when I step back out of the door, you know, and I think that's also kind of like what both Andreas and Edson talked about here, just in terms of we are people when we have, you know, different challenges and it changes, like our moods, our experiences changes, you know, throughout the day. And I think like for me, you know, like being mindful about things like mental health, because I navigate my own mental health, because sometimes it's about like you have to wear the shoe to have compassion for other people, but we also need to not have to wear the shoe to still have compassion, to recognize that because we're happy and things are great does not mean that everybody else, again, we're not the norm, does not mean that everybody else should be that way. To know that people carrying things and that having mental health challenges doesn't mean you are weak, doesn't mean that you don't have, I think I read or saw something where somebody was talking about mental health challenges is just like when you have it, it's like you have a weak mind that you need to toughen up or this or that. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, the privilege, you know, some people are just naturally predisposed, you know. But anyways, points being, yeah, we get to show up as we are, and it's important that we accept it as we are. So just last question before we go into the questions, because I see we have a couple, is I know you all have a lot of different tips and you've shared some of that today, but I want to ask you, what is your one tip, like the top tip to give people for amplifying disability inclusion in the workplace, or that those of us listening can start implementing tomorrow in the workplace or in our lives to be more inclusive of people with disability? To Andreas, I'm going to come to you.
Yeah. If I'm going to start off with one tip, it's hard to pick one, but I think I'm going to go with KPIs, because if it ain't measured, it doesn't get done. So how do you actually set key KPIs for your business to thrive inclusion, diversity, and belonging, and also recruitment of disabled people? So what I would say to that is that set KPIs along with the values of the companies as well, because it has to align with what's your strategy, what's your values, where are you going. And my biggest takeaway then is to actually ask for those competency. There's one statement in here that says about, well, if you have a workplace where it's very stressful, of course, the biggest thing would be to change that, but those are usually a longer route to take. But how do you actually value the capabilities of handling stress when you're recruiting? Or are you only measuring education and work experience?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. Sally?
Oh, one tip. Oh, I'm a politician. I feel like
One tip and quick, because we have a lot of questions to get.
One tip. I think that would be hire us. Hire us. I think that's like the big, yeah. Hire us. And also, like what Andreas said, he is not disabled at his work, and I think that's a lot of thing. That's like a major thing people forget. When I apply for a job, I apply for the job because I know that I can do the job. Like I apply for things that I know that I'm physically able to do, even though you might not think so because of X, Y, and Z, what kind of bias you have in your head. But just know that when you see a disabled person like applying for a job, it's not there by a random chance. Like they actually know that they can physically do the job that is supposed to be done. So hire us and just have it in the back of the head that we apply to things that we know we can do.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Eddie.
I would go assess the maturity level of your organization. That would be my tip. Okay, what do they know about it? What the stakeholders thinks about it, government, do we have any legislation about it? What they say about persons with disability, what the international norm says about it. And do you have champions in the cause? Do you know, can you map them? Can you influence them? And more than that, after knowing, and then people analytics can give nowadays all the data that you need, the numbers if you do not have person with disability, turnover, promotion, etc. But take action. Do not stop on intention. That's something that I want to highlight. Take action. If you fail fast, learn fast, and do something. But we need to act in that.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for sharing, and yeah, really a lot to reflect on. I need to rewatch this and rehear it again. So thank you all for being here. Now I'm going to jump to the questions from audience. We have some questions from Zoom and also from LinkedIn. I will currently just sift through questions that I feel like we have not talked about, because some of the questions I feel like you've already addressed in your answers, so maybe they came a bit earlier. So the first question here is from LinkedIn, where somebody says, and I want to correct an ableist language. It says, can blind recruitment processes contribute to the formation of more diverse teams? Just to say quickly, like, I know it's common to say blind recruitment, but that is actually an ableist language. Ideal would be anonymous recruitment instead of saying blind recruitment. But this question was posited to Edson.
Yeah, we do have some research. They say yes, it can be helpful. Like when you have anonymous CVs and then people just look into the capabilities, the skill that is written there. You don't have the name. Sometimes by the name, you know the gender, nationality, ethnicity, or something like this. And then your bias can come up front. It's very famous, the case of the New York Academy, when they were trying to hire musicians. And they did that, even the talent acquisition process, without seeing the people, just listening to what they would play, the instrument. And the first time they want to increase the number of females, they did increase, but then they didn't reach the target. And they realized, like, because of the sounds of the high heels going stage, the bias was activated and say, oh, that's a female, and then it was stronger. But I think it's a good practice, and I strongly recommend you do it.
Thanks a lot, Edson. To Andreas.
Good.
I just want to add to that, because we've had this discussion a couple of times in Norway as well. And I think it's important to look at the competencies again. Because when you talk about anonymous recruiting part, you usually just push the discrimination further down the line. Because at one point you will show up in a wheelchair, or you will show up being a Black woman. So it's important not to forget the bias in anonymous recruitment as well. So we need to keep that in focus.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. There's a question from Susanna. It's on mental health. I know we talked a little bit about depression, but I think it's worthy of further addressing. It says, what steps can be taken to address the stigma and misconceptions surrounding mental health disabilities in the workplace, and how can organizations foster an open dialogue on this topic? I also see that I think Emma had asked what Susanna meant by mental health disabilities, and Susanna said like things like anxiety, PTSD, and such. What are your thoughts? How can we reduce the stigma, and how can we talk more about it?
I think it's so easy to just say, I'll just talk about it. But I think, like, for me, for example, the fact that I'm so open with my disability, I have a lot of confidence in being disabled, but then again, that comes from my father. I think that it's important to, when you see a person being open, to kind of continue to push that kind of, like I said, I don't have any shame in holding a catheter in front of people, because I'm on my way to the toilet, you know, and I do it intentionally because I want you to see it. And I know that you see it and you probably have questions about it, but I'm not going to answer any questions until you ask me about it. So I think that if you have, it's so hard because the responsibility shouldn't be put on like an employee. But I think that if you have a person in your workplace already that kind of like, you know, that is openly gay and fabulous, and you see that's just like a natural thing, continue to foster that. If you have a disabled person who's like me, very open, continue to foster that. I think that if you have those people already in the workplace, if you are able to kind of like make sure that they are comfortable, they might naturally be able to kind of like get other people to also be, you know, talk about different stuff, because even though we work together, we're also friends and we do speak about things. So we might know things about our colleagues that our boss probably don't know. So if we already have those people that are secure within themselves and you see that they're embodying different things, try to you know, water them than stopping them, because I think that colleagues learn from other colleagues and we are friends at the end of the day. Some of us at work, it is easier to kind of, you know, become however your friend is, kind of.
Right. Andreas?
Yeah, I just want to, I'm supporting Sally fully out on what she's saying, but I also want to address something that's been noticed by me a lot over the years, and it's called microaggression. Because those few frames that, you know, comes out unintentionally, saying, oh, you're not joining that again, or oh, you're eating alone again. All those small comments, which are again not meant as a bad thing, but as you said earlier, Chisom, I don't really care about your intentions. It's how it impacts me. And especially if you have a bad day, I feel that the bar for coming with short, snappy comments are lowered. So to just be able to address that and say, hey, you might not be in a good place, or but what you said hit me in a wrong place because I really don't want to be left out. But it's how I'm handling my anxiety, or it's how I'm handling what I'm carrying. So the fact that we all need to address, and as you did earlier, Chisom, you said this is ableist language when it comes to what we call blind recruitment, anonymous recruitment. It doesn't need to be a hurtful comment, but it needs to be addressed so that they become aware that that actually was perceived from me as a little hurtful. It stung a little. So just to be aware of that. So that microaggression is a problem.
Absolutely. I think a lot about, this is the thing about being an active bystander. It's like, how do you address things? Don't make it a big deal, because, you know, we do the best you can until you know better. When you know better, do better. I think it was Maya Angelou that said it. I think there's something quite important about not pretending like something was not said, because you don't want to make people or yourself uncomfortable. And I think just kind of like addressing it. And the thing about addressing things that could be potentially uncomfortable, like I think about inclusion work or belonging like a muscle. The more you work at it, the more you practice, the better you get at it. It's a muscle. It's like going to the gym. You have to keep working at it. And when you stop working at it, you're going to start losing that muscle. Like it's just this ongoing thing. In terms of, and I also want to call Edson into this conversation, you know, for me, I navigate mental health, I navigate depression, I navigate an anxiety disorder. And so I also recognize the power that I hold in the positions and the spaces that I take. And for me, it's quite important to destigmatize what that is. Like a lot of people perceive me as, you know, highly productive, which I am. Like I can do a lot in a really short time. And I'm pretty much a badass. Like I get that, you know, but it's also quite important for me to say this is also what somebody who goes through bouts of depression looks like. This is also what a person who has an anxiety disorder looks like. And if I'm able to articulate that honestly, you know, I think it also gives people around me the permission to do the same. It also gives my team the permission to show up as they are, you know, and also just destigmatize. There's nothing to be ashamed about the fact that we go through different seasons in our lives. It gets hard when that is a stigma, and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to see you, or don't talk about it, because then you feel like you're alone in the world and that no one has your back. But when you feel like you're in a space where you could say, like, I'm really not doing well today, like I need to rest, I'm exhausted, you know, or I feel my anxiety disorder coming, my anxiety episode coming on, so I really need to take a break. That thing I promised that I really wanted to do, I'm not going to be able to be there, and that has to be okay. Edson.
Yeah, no, while you were speaking and Sally and Todd, it comes like we need to start touching people and say, use your privilege to speak about it. Where we don't have the persons with disability, where we don't have the Black, the LGBT, whatever, use that. It's uncomfortable. Maybe sometimes it's uncomfortable to talk about it, but suffering is even worse. So, and then we need to take the burden out of the underrepresented group. That's something that I've been fighting for. Like, oh, it's okay, you reduce the stigma, sharing story, people will talk about it, and then you have role models, and it's powerful. It needs to be done. But then they are minorities. We need everyone that goes and champion inclusivity. I'm not saying allyship. I'm kind of somehow with that word right now, like it's kind of more passive. I think that you need to champion that. If you are a leader, and for example, the case that Tour says, okay, you are a leader, and you know you work with that person, you need to educate yourself, change process, and etc. It's not the person that comes to you all the time and say that. Embrace the privilege that you have, educate yourself, and promote change. I think this is what we need, because just staying with the underrepresented group, it's going to stay there. We need to go beyond and be champion, not allies, champions, let's say.
Absolutely love that. And just quickly on allies, because we're just like, oh, I'm an ally. Okay, what does that mean? Like, can I take that allyship to the bank and then money will be deposited into my bank accounts? Like, what is that allyship? And something else, just like a small public service announcement, you shouldn't call yourself an ally. The community that you're allying yourself to should call you an ally. If you've not actually done work to amplify, like I understand the idea of allyship, where you say, like, I'm an ally to this, I'm passionate about this, I want to elevate it. But until somebody from that community tells you you're doing the work that we need you to do, you're an ally, you don't get to wear that badge. And even when that badge has been given to you, it's not a bachelor's degree, it's not a master's. You don't get it once and you have it forever. You can lose it just as quickly as you get it. It's a muscle that we have to continue improving. And what works for one person in a wheelchair does not work for the next person in a wheelchair. So your allyship also has to be nuanced and intersectional. But I really love that you brought up the thing about, you know, allyship, because it's just like, let's compartmentalize and unpack what allyship actually is, because we're just like, I'm an ally, so I'm good.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
There are a lot of allies in June, to say the least.
Yeah.
My God, yes.
I would just like to say to Edison, I told the CEO once that he should educate himself, but what he did was actually educate himself and put that education onto the people. So he then read about autism, and then everyone with autism was like that. So I'm saying educate yourself, but you are not allowed to put that on the individual, because it's individual's right to determine the factors and the roles to be that.
Agency absolutely matters. Sally.
And I also, just to like jump on what Andreas said, like, I think that people are very able to kind of like show by themselves what they can do or how they do things and things like that. So if you just sometimes just give a person some seconds or minutes to kind of like introduce themselves, or you just are observant, you might notice a lot of things that are unsaid. But it's to, yeah, that alley thing, you need to do the work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, can I add
Yeah.
something? Because it's getting warm, Brian, and we are about to finish. But it's like it's about the difference of being. It's like the same being no racist and anti-racist, right? Exactly, it's what we need. And suddenly, when I studying about what it means to be white and etc., understanding the white privilege and so on. And then it comes like people often comes with their white version. Oh, but I have these, I'm married, I have friends. But that doesn't mean that you are not racist. And people normally come trying to provide evidence as to how cool they am and etc. It has nothing to do with that. And say, okay, you are a nice person, but this action, this decision, this topic maybe is racist. I have CEO in previous company, and he said, well, I have one black person in my team that works for innovation, and he's not doing very well. And then, am I being racist? The first thing that I said, okay, I don't know, but let's look. What was the last 5 projects that person brought to you? How did you respond? How did you react? And how do you provoke and promote it? That's what we need more people saying. It's not about me, it's about others.
I'm thinking about what do you call it? I read somebody said, they think being told that they are racist, they are sexist, they are misogynistic, whatever it is, they understand that it doesn't define everything that they are, that they've done an action that brought about that feedback. And they think about those situations as like being told that you have bad breath, that you actually have the opportunity to go in and brush your teeth and then it smells better, right? So they actually open with they like the feedback because they know that they can always improve. They can always do better. And it's something that they can unlearn because sometimes, racism is imprinted into systems and structures. Ableism is imprinted into the language that we use. We don't even recognize that we use ableist language. Even a lot of us that absolutely want to create more space and more inclusion, right? So I think that it's just recognizing that this is the reality and then like owning it and doing something about it. I do want to ask an important question because I know we have to round up soon. Somebody asked on LinkedIn, I believe, or maybe it's on here. A team member is sending me the questions. It's on LinkedIn. It was in the era of remote work. How can companies ensure that virtual environments are inclusive and accessible to employees with a wide range of disability? And I think this is such an important question because we're talking about hybrid work and remote work, but people still need the right conditions, the right offices for this to happen. Any ideas?
I just want to start by saying what Andreas said, like one size only fits one person. And also what you said, Chisom, that your norm is not like the norm. So for me, I feel like, and also like having a disability, like it's a huge range of having a disability, and also like what kind of needs that you need to be met. But I just wrote down like just some things that I just thought of, that is to just do what you said, to describe oneself, because you never know. I just think that sometimes when we think about, to make it accessible for disabled people, we don't think about making it accessible for disabled people just makes everyone else's life easier. It just like you don't need to have a disability to just take to use these tools, or for it to just, it doesn't only pertain to a disabled person, but to always describe himself, who you are, what you look like, where you are, because someone might be at the toilet at that time. So it's just nice to know that, and that and sometimes, like, because I know that people want to see people on camera as well, but one thing that's important to know, that with a disabled body, you might not always be at your house. You might have people at your house. A lot of people have BPA, so that means you have assistants around you. Some people don't want probably the assistants to be on camera, or some people have different aids that they don't want their employees to know about, you know? So like the force of, but now everyone needs to be on camera. What if I'm in bed and I'm not physically, you know, able to get up right now because my stiff back? Is that a position that that employee should be seen in just because of what? Because you need to be on camera?
Right.
So I think that, yes, and I think it's like it's to think about equity, to be honest, and not equality when it comes to disabled people, and also like just the environment at work. Truly
Right.
focus on equity, because
Right.
that's how you will actually be able to assist and to accommodate people. I don't operate with equality. I'm an equity type of girl, because that's how you actually make sure that everyone gets the tools that they deserve to be able to come in, feel free, feel welcomed, and feel seen and heard.
Right. Equality sometimes also amplifies exclusion.
Yeah.
People have equality as like this pedestal that they need to get to. No, you don't reach equality without equity, you know. And even when you use equity, it's so important to recognize that equity allows for, say, for example, an equality of opportunities, but not outcomes. So that's also something we need to understand, that even if you equitably give people what they need, that they may not necessarily achieve this, you know, the same level you want them based on their intersectional identities that you cannot control for. But equity is the only way we actually arrive at equality. So equality can't be the goal. So Andreas, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just to add on the latest thing with big companies buying power, because we have rules now that systems in the public area is supposed to be accessible for everyone, like ticket systems and so forth. But when we order new systems for our workplace, are we aware that we ordered the right tools in those systems to be accessible for all? Because the rules aren't as targeted there. So, for instance, I had a candidate searching for within health, and she could not get a job because of sight, because the systems weren't able to function with her aids. So based on that, she couldn't get the work done. And we saw the immense thing that Microsoft Teams did when the pandemic comes. Suddenly, a lot of options were available. We know that that is able also to do with in-house office systems, but you have to be able to question it. You have to be able to say, well, here's my money. You'll get them if the system is accessible.
Right, absolutely. Edson, did you want to say something quickly? Yes?
Yeah, very quickly. I agree with 100% what they said. Architectonical, that's the way we can do. But pay attention to the inclusion, the behavior, leadership behavior inclusion that you need to do. How do we include that person that is in hybrid remote working into the decision making, into opportunities of the country, the company, opportunities where they can grow, and etc. Because it's easy to fall in the trap of, oh, they are there, so it's there, it's included, they have all the access, and again, technology, architectonical change, it's easy for a company who has money, but behavior needs to be there as well. How do we elevate and prepare everyone? Okay, how do I maybe need to do a sponsorship program with people that work in hybrid remote work? So we make sure they have visibility in the organization, etc. This kind of inclusion is something I think we need to do as well.
Right. Thank you all. This has been a wonderful conversation, such great questions. And I feel like we're just barely scratching the surface. So thank you for, sharing your insights, for being here with us, for the learning opportunity. I really appreciate it. I also want to say thank you to all the participants and the attendees. Really appreciate your time. I know 2 hours for us feels like, no, we can go 4 more hours, but I also recognize that 2 hours is a lot to sit behind a screen and listen to 4 enthusiastic people talk about something. So we really thank you for that. And I also just want to give a shout out to Sally and Eddie and to Andreas. We've also dropped in their LinkedIn connection pages. So if you want to connect with them, please do so. Yeah, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Chisom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have an amazing day.
Thank you.
Bye.